There's a soulfulness about your reporting. You operate in a particular kind of spirit. And I think particularly when you're telling stories about Sudan, it's very evident that you are not this detached observer, right? That you are connected somehow to the story. And I'm wondering, when you have that kind of intimate relationship with a country and then you attempt to tell its stories, how do you go about kind of monitoring yourself, right? There's often that argument that as a journalist, you don't want to become the story. But it's fair to say, like, often in your reporting, you have been part of the story. There's that scene of your uncle who you're telling the story of people leaving the city of Khartoum. And at that moment, you're trying to figure out a way to get back to Khartoum to basically rescue your parents from that situation. And you come across your uncle. And this is captured on film.
Yeah, it's live.
It's live. Yeah. It's live. It's an incredible scene. Yeah. And the two of you are kind of both overcome with emotion. You record that. We see that. There are other moments where it's very clear that you are engaged emotionally. How do you kind of manage that?
So by the time I'd seen my uncle, I'd run into 3 people on the way. So in Djibouti, I was told there's an NHS doctor to interview at the hotel. I go and it's an old friend. And off camera, we hug and we sob and then we sit down for the interview. Then I go and do an interview with a school teacher. She turns out to be the primary school teacher of my old school in Khartoum. And then I run into a friend in transit in Addis Ababa, So by the time I'd seen my uncle, and I knew before we climbed onto that ferry, that vessel, that I was going to see someone. I had this feeling of dread. I was just like, oh, who's it going to be this time? I'd never thought it would be him because last I'd heard he was still in Port Sudan. I didn't know he'd managed to get out. It was so organic. I mean, I just dropped everything. I forgot I was even being filmed because we were live on air and just rushed to him. And, the choice I was asked after, can we clip that up and share it on digital? And I was just like, sure. It didn't feel nefarious. It didn't feel self-interested. And I'm very kind of paranoid about that, as I think a lot of journalists are, about becoming the story. But it fundamentally feels dishonest to act like I'm not a part of the story, that this isn't my life, that I'm not dealing with this 24/7. And I also think it's about questioning my intentions and why I'm sharing. And also the reality is I'm constantly asking people to share their own intimate, horrifying experiences. And so it just feels like it's part and parcel of what we're trying to do, which is to alert the world about a huge, sprawling humanitarian crisis of catastrophic proportions that has touched everyone in a nation of 44 million people. And I happen to be one of them. And my privilege and all the things that you assume that I have as an educated woman who lives in, who straddles the West and Africa, I too am impacted. And my parents are impacted. And my life has changed. And that's just the reality. And to ignore that and act like that isn't the case is a disservice to everyone else who's going through it.